All right, good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to be running through a answers experience I built with the Yext knowledge graph and answers, and then a front end for my search experience using React. So let's get started. So looking at my Yext account here, I'm going to be demonstrating two different custom entity types that I built. The first one being movie. So movie, just to walk through some of the fields here, when you create a custom entity type, the entity ID and name are fields that are added by default. I've also added some other fields here. Description of the movie is a multi-line text field. Tagline is another simple text field. Genres is a list of movie genres, so a list of simple text. I'm going to come back to the stars field in a little bit. Poster will contain a movie poster, so the image of a movie poster for the given movie. MPA rating stands for Motion Picture Association rating, so rated G, R, PG-13, etc. And runtime is the runtime of the movie in minutes. And then the other entity type I'm using here today is a custom entity called actor. And again, name and entity field are there, name and entity ID field are there. Primary photo contains the headshot of the actor. Birthplace is where the actor was born. Bio, short bio, and height, those are all string fields. And so is birth date. And now the filmography field, I'm going to show you in fields here because I'm using a custom field type for filmography. And that custom type I created is called role. And so each role has a character name. So for an example, that could be Neo. In the movie would be The Matrix, and that would be a role for Keanu Reeves, and he could have a list of roles. For today, every actor just has one role currently in my knowledge graph. But if we go back over to that stars field I mentioned earlier, which is on the movies entity, it's similar. I'm using a custom field type called star that contains a role. So again, that would be Neo, and it would contain the actor. So that would be Keanu Reeves in this case. And the easiest way to show this is to go to a particular entity. So let's go to my Keanu Reeves entity. You can see the different information I've added here for him. But most importantly, I have this filmography field. So he's got a character called Neo, and the movie was The Matrix. So I'm basically linking Neo or Keanu Reeves to The Matrix through this Neo character. So if I go to The Matrix, you can see The Matrix has a list of stars. So the different roles here, Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, played by their various actors. And so I'm going to show you my answers configuration here. So if I go view the experience and go to my verticals, so here I have my actors vertical up. Entity type has the NLP filter on, so that if the search contains actor or actors, we're just going to get actors back in our universal query. I've turned off semantic text search for name, just using phrase match and text search for an actor's name. And then I'm added the NLP filter here for character name in the filmography, and then also the movie name. The reason I'm doing that is if someone enters the character name Neo, only actors that have that character name should appear. So in this case, just Keanu Reeves should come up. And then if I were to query for The Matrix, any actors that played in The Matrix should come up. I've also added some direct answer fields here, height, birth date, and birthplace. And if you're not too familiar with direct answers, I'll be showing what that means here in a second. I've also added some synonyms. So height should, for example, mean the same thing as tall. Birthplace, same thing as born. And then moving over to my movies vertical, similar to what I did for actors, I have the NLP filter on for actor name. So typing in the actor's name, Keanu Reeves, should pull up movies that he starred in. So in this case, it would just be The Matrix. Typing in the role Neo should return any movies that have Neo in them. So I also had a direct answer here called MPA rating. So I can ask, what is The Matrix rated? So just to run a couple text searches here. So if I type in The Matrix, I'm going to get that movie entity back along with some different actors that appeared in the matrix. I could type in Buzz Lightyear. And I get the actor that played Buzz Lightyear along with the movie that has Buzz Lightyear in it. And then to demonstrate direct answer, so if I were to do how tall is Tom Hanks, you can see that the answers algorithm actually extracted the string here 6 foot from the Tom Hanks entity. Okay, so I feel pretty good about my answers configuration right now. And I know I went through that pretty quickly. I'm actually working on a blog piece right now that will explain a little bit more about how I configured these different fields and the decisions I made. So hopefully that's published pretty soon and I'll be able to share that. But for now, I'm going to show you how to build a UI for this answers experience using React. And right now, the easiest way to do that is the Yext React site. I have it bookmarked here somewhere. So the Yext React site search starter. Melissa, if you could share a link to this in the chat. And in the README of this repo, there's nice instructions on how to fork this repo to your own GitHub account and then clone it to get started, which is something that I've actually already done. So I have this open currently in VS Code. And the first file I want to show you in here is answers. I need to move this Zoom panel out of here so I can see the top of my screen. So if I go to answers headless config, you can see I've already added the API key for my answers experience in the experience key. And I'm using a Sandbox Yext account for this demonstration today. So I've needed to add those Sandbox endpoints. And actually, I'm going to go back to my account real quick just to show you. If you go to all experiences, if I go to view my movie search experience, I go to experience details. You can find the API key here along with the experience key. So back over here, so I've already plugged this in. So I can start running this app in development mode with Npm Start. Let me just make sure I'm on the right branch here. Yeah, okay, so Npm Start. So in a few seconds here, this starting the development server, so should be running the application locally. All right, so this is similar to what you would see if you were to clone the repo and start running the application. So if I type in, for example, movies, it's pulling up the different movies that are in my knowledge graph. And you can see there's not a whole lot of styling going on here, just some default styling for the search bar and the different movie entities that I have here. So I want to make this a little more custom, make this look and feel the way I want. So back into my code, I'm going to go to app.tsx, which is the starting point of the application. Now I need to pause here for a second and explain Tailwind CSS. So this application is bootstrapped using Tailwind CSS, and it's a CSS framework. And there's some other CSS frameworks out there like Materialize or Bootstrap that are component based. So you're dropping those components into your application, which is nice for getting started building good looking applications. But the problem you run into with those CSS frameworks is that if you look at a lot of Materialize or Bootstrap applications, they start to look kind of similar. The advantage to using Tailwind CSS is that you get a bunch of different utility classes that you apply to your components and elements in your application, and you can really customize the look and feel of your app. The disadvantage is if you're not super familiar with Tailwind, it can be a little hard to explain everything that's going on. So what you see here in these divs is actually Tailwind classes being applied for some styling. So some of you may be familiar with Flex or Justify Center. And then px4, that's actually applying a horizontal padding, and py6 is applying some vertical padding. And so I encourage you to check out the Tailwind docs if there's some Tailwind classes I'm using here today that you're not familiar with. Melissa, if you could drop the Tailwind documentation link in the chat. So I'm going to start doing a little customization here. I'm actually going to, first thing I'm going to do is actually remove this justify center. And I'm just going to remove the max width for now. This is some Tailwind classes that come with the application by default. But if I save and come back over here, you can see that all that's left is just the padding, the vertical and horizontal padding. And the reason I've chosen to do this will make more sense in a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is go over to my standard layout component. So this component comes along with the sample app when you clone it, and it lays out the search bar. Typically, it will also lay out a nav bar so you can navigate between different vertical pages. But for today, I'm just going to be using the universal search page, which is actually passed to this component. So what you see here is the search bar, and then the universal search page here. And yeah, so I've commented out the navigation links already. And now I want to change a little bit how my search bar looks. So a lot of the components in here for search bar, for example, if I open search bar, has a bunch of built-in CSS classes. So this is all Tailwind CSS utility classes that control how the search bar looks and acts. So I want to change some of these. I want to change container, logo container, input container, and input dropdown container. I've actually already added this object to my application that has some different Tailwind that I want to change. The first thing I need to do here, is pass a CSS composition method. And the reason I'm doing CSS composition method assign is because I want to assign the Tailwind classes I have here and basically replace container, input container, these four. I don't want to mess with the other built-in classes. The README for this application has a really good explanation on the different CSS composition methods. You have assign, merge is the default, and then replace. I'm mostly going to be using assign today, but I encourage you to check out the README to learn a little bit more about the CSS composition method. So now I'm going to pass custom CSS classes. I'm going to pass search bar, CSS styles. So I'm going to save. And you can see that I changed the border radius of the search bar a little bit, and there's now a new font in there. And if you can see in the auto complete section there, the border radius changed a little bit and the font changed. And so those are some of the things that I'm passing here. For example, this font display is a custom font I've added. I'm going to show you how I added that font here in a second. And I've changed the border radius in the input dropdown container a little bit. So the other thing I want to do is I'm actually going to go into search bar. I'm going to go to input dropdown. I actually want to change a little bit of the pre-built code here. I'm going to move the search button, cut that. I'm actually going to put it up here. I'm going to save. And you can also see that I'm hiding the logo container. So I'm hiding the Yext logo that comes as part of this application by default. So if I go back here, you can see now that the search icon, rather than appearing at the end of the div here, is now at the beginning. So this font here, you can see the font is different than some of the default font down here. So what you can do with Tailwind is in your Tailwind CSS folder. This is where this is like the main file for your CSS, and I've added these fonts here from Google Fonts, and I've saved these fonts in a folder I created called fonts. So these are the two fonts I've added from Google Fonts. And then in Tailwind config, This is where I actually can customize my Tailwind CSS. So I've added those two fonts, display and body, and I'm going to be using those throughout my application. I've added some other Tailwind customization, like this slate color that I've added. And here's the hex value for the color. And that's something that's not a color that's not included in the base palette. So I need to add that. And there's some box shadows I'm going to be applying to some divs later on. And then this min width is something I'm going to be using later too. So let's see. So having explained that, I'm going to now start to customize how these movie cards look. I want to change how they look here and deliver my own custom look and feel for these movie cards. So I've actually already added, I'm gonna close everything right now. I go over to movie card. So this is a card that I've actually already, I added this myself, and there's a lot going on here. But to explain a few things, I've added this interface that represents the data that comes back from the Answers API. You can see that most of the fields here have the conditional operator on them because there's not a guarantee from the API that any of these fields will not be null, but name is guaranteed to be there. So that does not have the conditional operator on it. I've added some Tailwind CSS that I'm going to be using here in a little bit. And I will explain some of these functions that I've added in a little bit as well. But to start working with this, I'm going to first on this outer div here, I'm going to apply class name, and I'm going to do movie card CSS styles dot container. And in this div in here, it's going to be a self-closing div. I'm going to apply class name. So movie card CSS styles dot movie poster container. And then something I need to do with some inline CSS is I'm going to apply a background image. So this is something I have to do. I can't do it with Tailwind. I have to add the background image URL here. So this div will have, the background image will be the movie poster. So I'll save that, and you won't be able to see this in the search results quite yet. So first I have to navigate over to movies section. This is another component I've added. It's very similar to the standard section that comes with this application. And I'm just going to pass some custom CSS classes here to my vertical results. And I'm going to pass the vertical results CSS classes that I've added here. I'm doing some breakpoints here. So the number of, I recommend looking up responsive design with Tailwind, but basically for different screen sizes that I'm going to be displaying my movie cards in a grid format, and based on the screen size, the number of columns will change. And then there's also a gap I've specified to be between each movie card. So I'll save that. And the last thing I need to do to actually see my changes reflected in my application is to go to the universal results configuration. And so you can see that nothing's been added here, and I need to add the vertical key. So in this case, it's movie. And so with movie, I'm going to add the card configuration. So I need my custom card components, which is the movie card. And then show ordinal. This is, I'm going to set this to false for now. This is a required field. I don't need to see like the number, like which result, like 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to display that. And then section component, that's the movies section that I've added. So I'm going to save that. All right, so have the movie card, have my movie section, and I've added it to my universal results config. So going back to my movies page, you can see that the movie cards are now laid out in a grid, and the whole card is being taken up by the movie poster. Now I want to continue to enhance my movie card a little bit, and for sake of time, I'm going to do some more copy and pasting real quick. I'm going to add this div here with some Tailwind classes I've called text panel, and I'll explain that in a second. And then I'm going to add this piece of code here called text container. So text panel is the styling is up here. You can see it's absolutely positioned panel that takes up the entire container, takes up the entire outer container. And it has a background color of gray, but I've set the opacity to 0, so you can't see it right now. And I'll explain that in a second. But with text container contains the name of the movie. It's calling this render movie info function that will render the rating of the movie, the runtime of the movie, and just the first genre in the list of genres the movie has. And then finally, this render description. Did I add this? Oh, I added this all in the wrong place. So this needs to go down here. I'm glad I caught that. Put this down here. Clean things up a little bit. So then calling the render description function, pull up the description of the movie. The render movie info functions calling time convert. So it's converting the runtime of the movie in minutes to, like, it's changing it from, instead of displaying an hour or instead of displaying 121 minutes, it'll display 2 hours and 1 minute. So quickly, before I show you these changes in the application, I'm going to go back to this text panel and text container, the Tailwind classes I'm using here. So for both, you can see initially the opacity is set to 0, meaning that both these components are completely invisible. But I'm actually using this other Tailwind class called group on the outer container. And what group does is I can then use this group hover. So if the whole container is hovered, the opacity will go from 0 for the text panel to 90. And then for text, it'll go from 0 to 100. And I'm also going, and it's not going to happen instantly. I'm going to use this transition class to take it from opacity of 0 to 90 over the course of 300 milliseconds. And then in the case of the text, I'm going to take it an opacity from 0 to 100 over the course of 500 milliseconds. So I've added that. And if I come back here, now you can see what that change does. When I actually hover over the card, it's fading in, and that text panel is that gray background. It has an opacity of 90, and you can see the text is completely legible now, or readable now, and it has an opacity of 100. Now you can see that this is not exactly how I want to lay out the movie info. I want this to appear in line. And this is the only place in my application where I'm using an unordered list with these list elements. So if I go to Tailwind CSS, I can actually extend this. So basically on the Tailwind base styling, I can, for every list element, I'm going to apply inline block. So if I save that, it's basically like a global rule for all list elements. Let me refresh the page here, see if I got it to work. Okay, yeah, so now you can see the movie info is laid out in line there. All right, so now I've got my movie cards. I'm gonna move on to building some cards, some custom card components for my actor cards. And one thing I did forget to mention about this movie card component, it's going to be something else I do with actor card, is I'm going to, for the props, I'm going to use type card props, which is something included with the starter application. So these are the props provided to every card component. And you can see it contains the search result. And then I'm extracting the result here to movie, and I'm pulling the raw data out of the result that contains all of this up here, description, poster, etc. And I can do as on known as movie, because I'm basically saying to TypeScript, even though it says it's unknown, I know that it's a movie type. So you can do this here for pulling out the raw data out of search results. So I'm actually going to close everything up here, clean up a little bit. I'm going to open the actor card component that I've already added. Similar to movies, I've added the interface already with some of this stuff being conditional values. I've also added some Tailwind CSS classes already. And with the actor, I'm extracting the actor information out of the raw data from the result. The first thing I'm going to do with the actor card is add class name. And this is going to be actor card CSS styles dot outer container. And then similar to what I did with the movie poster, I'm just gonna speed things up by doing some copy and pasting once I copy the correct thing over here from my script. So I'm gonna paste that in there. So I have an outer container here that has a set width and a set height, making it a rectangular container. And then I'm placing the headshot, the actor's headshot, absolutely positioned. It's going to appear on the left side of the outer container. It's going to have the actor's headshot here. And then I'm going to use this inner container here to put some bio information for the actor, but I'm going to actually fill this out here in just a bit. But first, I'm going to pull up my actors section. So an actor section, again, very similar to movie section and the standard section, but I'm going to add some custom CSS classes. I'm going to add vertical result CSS styles. What this is going to do is going to lay out my actor cards horizontally, not in a grid, not in a list, but a horizontal overflow, so I can actually scroll left and right on the actor cards, and I'm placing some space between each actor card. So I've saved my actor card and actor section. I'm going to go over to universal results config, and here I'm going to do actor is the, or actually is the vertical key is actors, and in here card config, the card config card component is my actor card that I just showed you, show ordinal. It's also going to be set to false. Section component here is going to be the actors section. All right, so if I save that, come back over here and let's do a search for actors this time. So you can see the different actors, and I can scroll horizontally and see the different actors that were returned. And now I'm going to go back to my actor card to add some more features to my actor card here. And again, I'm just going to do some copy and pasting. Format this a little bit better. All right, so I have it in this inner container. The inner container is this outer gray box you see. And then I added this actor text container that contains the actor's name with my display font. And then I'm using a different font for the actor bio here. Back also using one of those custom box shadow, some of this box shadow CSS I added to my, if we go over to Tailwind CSS, or no, Tailwind config. So this is some of the custom box shadows. So basically extended Tailwind and added some custom CSS to Tailwind. So here I'm using shadow bio. So that's providing that this shadow behind this white box here to give it kind of like that 3D look to it. And yeah, so those are my actor cards, but I do still want to do some other stylistic stuff to my application. So first thing I want to do is go back over to Tailwind CSS. And on the entire body of the application, I'm going to apply the background color and then my color that I added to Tailwind. So BG is to apply a background color, applying slate as the background color, and that's to the entire body. And then you could do, for example, background red, which is a color that comes with Tailwind, but I wanted to add my own color, so I added it here in Tailwind config. If I go back, I think things look a little nicer now. If I go to movies, you can see this is a box shadow I added earlier. I didn't mention it, but I added a custom box shadow to these movie cards to give it kind of that glowing effect. So let's see, what are some other stylistic things I want to do? So you can see here, I've got this section header here that there's this little icon you can barely see, and then movie, it doesn't look how I want. So I'm going to style that section header, and that's accessible in my universal results page. And so I'm going to add to the section header here, I'm going to add a CSS composition method of assign, and then I'm going to add what am we doing here? Okay, yeah, custom CSS classes, and I've already added some custom CSS up here, the section header style. So I'm going to apply it now. I'm going to hide that little icon with the Tailwind class called hidden, and just going to change that label to use my font that I've added, semi-bold, white text, and change the size of it. So if I do, what did I call it again? It's section header styles. Come back over here. Now you can see the section header, all caps, bold, using this custom text that I added. And then last thing I want to do is, so if I search, for example, what is Fight Club rated? Oh, I actually already added, this was something I was going to do in the webinar, but I've actually already added some styling for direct answer here to give it this background, use the text here. This isn't what direct answer would look like out of the box using the sample app, but it looks like I already saved some of my custom styling for direct answer. So just to wrap up here, I'll just do a couple more searches. So just to show you how this works. So if I do Buzz Lightyear, I get the actor that played Buzz Lightyear, voiced Buzz Lightyear, get the movie Toy Story 2. If I look up Toy Story 2, I'll put the movie result first, and then the different actors. I've only added 3 actors for each movie. And I could do action movies because genre is a NLP filter and facet, so it will return all the action movies. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show here today. So for some next steps, where to learn more. So go to visithitchhikers.com to learn about the knowledge graph, answers. There's some guides there on getting started with answers headless. And then I wrote a blog a couple weeks ago, which covers creating the movie entity with a couple of fields and just getting started with the React sample app. I don't know, Melissa, if you could add these links in the chat as well. And then I'm also working on writing up everything that I covered here today in a part 2 of my blog series. So hopefully I'll be sharing that pretty soon. And with that, I will open it up to questions. Okay, so we have a question here. Notice within your movie card function component, you had several render functions, movie info and description. And so fairly new to React, was curious about your decision to utilize these render functions as opposed to either A, breaking down those subcomponents for movie info and description into their own component files entirely, or B, returning all of the JSX for movie directly in the return value of the movie card function. Okay, so there's a lot there, but what DJ is asking about is in movie card here, I've chose to, so here's the return function that actually, or the return method that actually returns the function, but I'm broke out the description into this function here and movie info here. And so the reason I did that, a couple reasons for code readability. If I were to have all of this in the return here, it would just get really lengthy. And then also just for kind of the mental model, whenever you're working in React, you break things down into components. So breaking these down into pieces made it easier for me to style that. So if you look at the app here, made it easier for me to think about this movie info section and then this description section. I want to think of those as two separate functional components. And even though they're not broken out into their own functional component styles, because they're only used by the movie card, so I have them within the movie card function here. But in the future, if I needed to reuse these functions, I could break them out into their own functional component styles. Melissa, is there any other questions in the chat?
I don't see any. Feel free to post in the chat if anyone else has any other questions, though. Aaron, looks like you answered all of the questions. So if you want to wrap up, I think, oh, maybe we have one more question, it looks like.
Okay. Let's see here. Any conflicts existing with Tailwind and Bootstrap? So I'm using the React site starter. So the question from Jeff here is, when integrating the search results into existing website, any conflicts with Tailwind and Bootstrap? So if I were using an existing website, I started this site using the React to use the React site starter application. It comes with Tailwind already built in. If I was adding answers to an existing application, I would likely use just answers headless React. So that doesn't come with all of the pre-built components you saw here today, but that would enable you to use answers with those other CSS frameworks. I haven't tried to add to this particular site starter app. I haven't tried to add Bootstrap. I haven't used Tailwind and Bootstrap together before, so I don't have a great answer to that. But if you're already using Bootstrap, an existing application, you could use answers headless React, which provides the state bindings to the answers API. You would just have to write your own search bar components, result components, things like that. And looks like we have another question. I'm wondering if these answers are builds that are parts of a separate website, and then why is Yext involved other than a sandbox? I'm not sure if I will read the blog. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I totally understand the question, but I will be going more in depth. I started with part 1 of this blog, and then I'm going to write up a lot of the things that I showed here today that aren't included in part 1. And hopefully that provides some explanation to your question. But if that's all the questions, thank you for attending today. Hope everyone has a nice day, and looking forward to seeing you on Hitchhikers. Thanks.